hey, look, waiting on a new coach here as well. Could hardly use 2 tight end sets last year. I think the way Billy Napier probably wanted to use them, not anything like we, I think, planned. Look, even going through a year ago, remember, tight end got decimated last spring, and the injuries continued into the season as well. So Napier not being able to run and use 2 tight ends as he had accustomed to, not only injuries, but, talent not necessarily there. That plays a part there too. So in the mix, of course, would be Keon Zipper making his return to go along with Jonathan Odom, who showed some flashes later in the season. Last year, spring star Dante Xanders returns, but not much of a factor last season. So going and dating back to last year, I'm excited to see what Artis Boardingham can do this spring. I know he turned a few heads last year with his ability, 6'3", 235. I look for Napier to try and get him involved for mismatches. Add 3 more, Andrew Sabanea, Hayden Hansen, Tony Livingston, who was originally a recruit last year, but gray-shirted, counts for this year's class. All the tight ends, 7 there. Not a lot of production through those 7, though. So we know Napier likes to run 2 tight ends. That's probably why. 7 seems like a high number for tight ends, but not when you run the 2 tight ends that Napier likes to run. But also look at this, maybe whoever loses the reps this spring, you might get a transfer or 2 with guys maybe not liking their role or their playing time as spring practice kicks off this week.
Yeah, I'm interested to see. So I saw something the other day. Georgia ran 12 personnel more than any team in the country, and part of that is because of the beasts that they have at tight end. But part of that is because as everyone is starting to spread out, and as you're bringing in linebackers who can run, and you're essentially saying, we dare you to run the ball against us, having tight ends in there who can maul those smaller guys becomes really important, right? Essentially a nickel defense is the standard base defense at this point in college football. And so bringing those guys in and being able to block, I think, is almost as critical as being able to catch. And so that's what I'm looking for in the spring. A guy like Hayden Hansen, is he going to be able to be a road grader? Is Livingston going to be able to be a road grader? Is Boardingham going to be a good enough blocker that if he's a downfield threat, at least you can run the ball with those tight ends out there? Because let's be honest, that's what Georgia did. Georgia was able to take advantage of the fact that Bowers and Washington both had different skill sets, but also that those guys essentially could serve almost as 2 extra offensive linemen, which allows you to take advantage of the base personnel. And then if the defense brings in somebody big, well, now you split out the tight ends, the Bowers in this case, out wide, and you let him take advantage of his skill and his ability. Now, look, Keon Zipper has shown that sort of ability. He just hasn't been able to stay on the field. A couple of years ago in the comeback against Georgia, Zipper is the one who made the big play when Florida was down 14-0, sort of broke a bunch of tackles, drove down on a drive downfield. Florida gets to 14-7, and all of a sudden the game completely changes. The great play he made against Tennessee. Obviously everybody's been seeing that because all the draft guys are posting Anthony Richardson clips where he's dancing around in the pocket and then gets the ball to Zipper. But the thing you forget is Zipper caught the ball at like the 17-yard line, just ran over 4 or 5 balls all the way to the end zone. So Florida has some talent at the position. The question is going to be, can they stay healthy? And in my mind, the question is, do you gain something in the running game by having 2 tight ends in? Because that was the problem last year, is Florida didn't gain anything in the blocking game by having 2 tight ends in. And if that's the case, you might as well just split out 3 wide, because you're not forcing the defense into anything other than its base nickel. And you can't take advantage of that if you can't block it.
All right, let's play a game here, guys. All right. Brock Bowers, 2 seasons at Georgia, 56 receptions and 13 touchdowns his freshman year, 63 receptions and 7 touchdowns last year, right? Would you take
53 and 63?
Yeah, and 7 touchdowns last year. Would you take, let's say, 25 receptions and 4 touchdowns out of your top receiving tight end? If I gave it to you right now and can guarantee it, would you take that right now?
25 and 4?
Just to illustrate the difference of what we're talking about here between the best tight ends in America and what we're dealing with right now.
Yes.
I'd sign up for that. I'd sign up for that right now. For just
that means our quarterbacks have thrown for 4 touchdowns. I'm in.
Yeah, 13 receptions for 177 yards and a touchdown. That, by the way, everyone remembers that touchdown from Tennessee last year. Will, name the second best play a tight end made last year. And
Jonathan Odom versus FSU.
Florida State.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so and 1 touchdown on the season there for Zip. So I like the potential for Zipper as well. Outside of that, Odom came on a little bit late there, but I'm not seeing a lot of hope out of this tight end position this year. I think it's another year to develop, and definitely got to bring some guys in at that position.
Remember the spring game last year? It was tight end dominated, even with all the injuries.
Right, Sanders had a nice game, right?
Yeah,
and that's why I'm like you, Dave, where you talked about you threw out Boardingham and Hansen out there. So I'd love to see somebody step up, but like I said, if you gave me 25 receptions and 4 touchdowns right now, I would sign up for that in a heartbeat.
Well, it's like I said, I actually don't think the receiving numbers are the critical part. I think the question is going to be, can they block? And if you've got guys out there who can block, then you're going to get the receptions. Like even you think about like Travis Kelce, he just sort of, he's able to block enough that he runs that sort of like little 5-yard thing, turns around, and Mahomes hits him. Now, I'm not comparing these guys to Mahomes and Kelce at all, but how often did we see Florida just pick up an easy 6 or 7 yards last year on a play where a tight end basically goes out, 4 or 5 yards, turns around, you hit him in the chest, and you live to fight on 2nd and 4. I mean, never. Right. And so just those sorts of things, being able to add that in. And honestly, that's where you get the defense caught in a nickel and you got a big tight end, a guy like Boardingham or a guy like Hansen, kind of a big dude who can just go out there and essentially play power forward, turn around, box him out, get the catch. And there just wasn't anybody on the roster who could do that. They were trying to get open using skill last year. I think in some ways you want to get it open via scheme, right? You want to either make them bring in a big guy so you can go deep, or if they're going to stay small, you kill them either by blocking or by just getting out there and catching a 4 or 5 yard pass the whole way downfield. And, they weren't able to do that last year. And I think some of that was Anthony Richardson. I think some of that was the tight ends. And I think some of that honestly was just, if you looked at that team, you'd rather have Pearsall, Henderson, and Shorter out there than anybody who is at the tight end position. And hey, that may hold true this year, but in terms of what Napier wants to do, in terms of the way college football is moving, right? I mean, it's always a dance of trying to find an edge. And it used to be that you had big linebackers, and so you spread everything out to take advantage of those big linebackers. Well, Nick Saban famously, after Manziel beat him, decided he was going to start recruiting guys who were really fast at the linebacker position, but you give up size when you do that. And so now everything is starting to come back in. You can actually see that in some underlying stats last year. Quarterbacks, for years, completion percentages have been going up with yards per attempt. And last year's the first year those things actually went in the opposite direction. And so I suspect that that's a big part of like things starting to constrict a little bit and offense is changing. So, there was some question, I think, early on last year about whether Napier's sort of offense with the 2 tight ends was the right way to go. I'm actually becoming more and more convinced that is the way college football is headed, just sort of in response to all the spread offenses that have been proliferating throughout college football.
Interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting to keep an eye on this year. And hopefully, as we know, Napier history says likes to use those 2 tight ends. Maybe we see it this spring in Gainesville and it translates to this fall.
Want more Gators Breakdown? Join Gators Breakdown Plus. Starting at $3 a month. Get access to unique episodes, plus a blog, chat rooms, giveaways, shout-outs, and more. Gators Breakdown Plus is furthering the interaction with fans and listeners like you. Head to gatorsbreakdown.supportingcast.fm to join Gators Breakdown Plus today.